So good morning to those in the USA. Good afternoon to those people in Europe. I'm James Burns from Jedi News, and you are watching Forcefest. Today, this is a collector's cast fan focus. And if you haven't already guessed, the fan focus today is on the one and only Stephen Sansweet. And now,
Hello,
Steve is sort of speaks for himself, but for those that don't know, let me just explain that Steve has been involved in the Star Wars community right from the get-go. He's an avid collector, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes. But right from the beginning, he's been there. He's been immersed in Star Wars. He was so immersed in Star Wars that Lucasfilm poached him from his full-time job, brought him over from LA to Northern California to work as director of fan relations. And we've all seen him at celebrations all over the world. He is synonymous with Star Wars in the same way that George Lucas is synonymous with Star Wars. And I'm very, very proud and privileged to call him a friend. We've known each other for many, many years. And today we're going to look at Steve's journey from LA to forming a virtual museum, which we'll get onto a bit later. Hi, Steve.
Hello, James. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
It's been a while. We can't meet in person, but this is the next best way.
It certainly is. So for those that don't know, let's go right back to the beginning. Before Star Wars, were you actually a collector at that point?
I think I was a collector all my life. When I was a kid growing up, I collected baseball cards and comic books and bottle caps and matchbook covers. But I also had a love for science fiction. Friends of my parents were among the first subscribers to the Science Fiction Book Club. And when they were finished reading the books, they lent them to me. And so I grew up both with a collector gene and with a love for science fiction and fantasy. And so those things sort of merged later in life. And I had toys as a kid, obviously, and I loved my Space Fort, my Marx Space Fort, and Major Matt Mason toys and things of that nature. But in the mid-'70s, I got involved in going to collector shows and seeing these rockets and robots from Japan and Germany, tin toys and tin and plastic, and got very excited about that. And then decided to do, I was a journalist, I was a reporter at that time for the Wall Street Journal in Los Angeles, and I decided to do a story on antique toy collecting, which at the time meant toys mainly at the turn of the 19th, 20th century and early 20th century toys. But I went to one guy and I interviewed him about his old toy collection, and he said, "But you want to know what the next hot thing is going to be?" And he brought out a cardboard container. It was filled with these robots, Robert Robot, all plastic, $2.98. I looked at the price tag, saw where he bought them, and immediately went to the Hollywood toy shop after the interview and bought 9 different robots and all the batteries for them, brought them home, put them on the kitchen floor, inserted the batteries, had them all walk across the kitchen floor, scared the dog half to death. And that was the beginning of my obsession with space toys.
So where did pop-up books come into it? Because I know that you were also a big fan of pop-up books in those early days. Still are, but...
I still am, and still have a separate, that's one of the few other collections that I have now on the pop-up books. And the oldest one I have is from the 30s and is a Buck Rogers little book with one pop-up in the middle. And but I love pop-up books from the 50s and 60s, and a lot of the newer books, which are meant for adults as well as kids. The Gaudi architecture and the cosmos and things of that nature. But then there was the Jolly Jump Ups. So yeah, I remember the Jolly Jump Ups.
And do you still actively collect those today?
I do. They're harder to find in bookstores because, and you want to see what you're getting, except for some of the people whose names you know, like Matthew Reinhardt, who's done a bunch of the high-end Star Wars pop-up books. So you want to see, and because bookstores don't get very many copies of a book in, and pop-up books, in order to open them, you sort of ruin one copy. So
Yep.
at least my local bookstore has stopped selling most of the pop-up books.
Okay, so moving on a few years, we got to the mid-70s, and the buzz was out in 1976 about this little film that was coming out. So how did you first hear about Star Wars?
I had read some things. There was a story in the Los Angeles Times. The main arts critic went over to London, and he saw what this guy who made American Graffiti was doing in a very different kind of way. And I read the story, got very interested in it, and sort of followed it in the trade newspapers, the entertainment trade papers like Daily Variety. There'd be little stories from time to time. But then I also talked to the head of publicity at 20th Century Fox, and he said, "Oh, there's something coming along that you're really going to like, Steve." And then they had a media screening on the back lot of 20th Century Fox about a week and a half before Star Wars opened in May of 1977. So it was a chance to see the picture before all of the hype started. And at that point, they knew they had something special. And it was amazing. I could still remember being in the Darrell F. Zanuck Theater, and along with everybody else. And the Star Destroyer comes by, and we're all sort of looking up on the ceiling and realize how we have been tricked by the filmmaker into thinking that there was a huge Star Destroyer up above coming in somehow. And everybody sort of did this nervous little giggle. And I just remember loving the film so much. And right after the screening ended, I went up to the PR guy and said, "Could I have my ticket invitation back, please?" So that's one of my first collectibles.
So what happened from there? Because obviously we didn't really see many collectibles for, the best part of a year, really.
Well, the first collectible had come to the office at the Wall Street Journal, and it was a bidder's brochure sent to the movie theaters to bid on showing Star Wars. And it was a full color booklet, very exciting, came in a cardboard box with a band around it. And the guy who covered the movie business for the Wall Street Journal at the time looked at it and then threw it in his wastebasket. And I waited till he left for the day and just sort of traipsed over to the wastebasket. So that was my first dumpster find for Star Wars. And it sort of started accumulating fairly quickly. There were T-shirt transfers, and eventually Kenner Products, which couldn't do the plastic figures in the first year, did puzzles and some board games. There was jewelry by a subsidiary of Factors Inc., a company working with Factors Inc., which did the posters. And I can remember getting the jewelry at a checkout stand at Spencer Gifts in the U.S. So it was slowly building, and it was part of the space toy collection. And then the action figures came out. I started collecting those, but I quickly took them off all the cards and put them in like a diorama kind of thing. And later went back and recollected those and got a dealer to put together a set of the original 12 figures mint on the cards. That's one of my favorite collecting stories. He put together the set early on for about $185, and he only took cash. And I had to drive about a half hour from my house. I didn't have that much gas in the car. I didn't have that much extra cash in my pocket. But after he sold me the set of figures that I had come down for, he said, I have something else here you might be interested in, and took out from under the counter a vinyl Cape Jawa mint on the card, unpunched card. And I said, "What's that? That looks ugly." So, the Jawas should have the cloth cape. I mean, that looks sort of nice. And I said, did some fan make that? And he said, no, 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 this is some alternate product and, hard to find. And I said, well, how much do you want for it? And he said, $40. And I said, $40? I just paid you 185 for 12 figures and you want 40 for this ugly Jawa? I think I'll pass. And so I took my 12 figures, went outside to my car, was about to put the key in the door lock, and something said to me, Steve, go back. If you pass it up now, well, I had to worry because I had just enough money to pay for either gas or a Jawa figure. And I guess that's the way things have been for the next 40 years because I went back and bought the Jawa figure for $40. So something told me that this would be a pretty good thing to buy.
Now, at this point, you're living in Hollywood. Is that right? In LA?
I was living in the hills east of Hollywood, and it was in a one-story cantilevered house, which meant it was on stilts, and the stilts went into the hillside. So
okay, so I'm going to show a picture. So just bear with me a second while we do this. So let's do. Okay, so I'd like you to explain, please, what's going on in this picture.
So this was a one-story house in the hills. You can see these poles coming down in the front of that. And my collection started getting really big. It was not just Star Wars, but it was all the rockets and the robots and Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and Major Matt Mason and just all that kind of stuff. And I desperately needed some storage space. I was storing things. I was taking Polaroid pictures of things as I bought them and putting them in boxes and then putting them in giant garbage bags and putting the garbage bags under the neighbor's house, their unfinished basement. And one day they said, Steve, we're going to finish the downstairs, so you got to get your stuff out of there. And so I decided to add a floor underneath the main floor of the house. And so this is the construction for adding a floor underneath the main floor of the house, turning it into a 2-story house. And that lasted me for about a year and a half. And then I ran out of space again.
Okay, so this is after you've added some more space, I think. Is that right?
So this is the 3rd floor, and this is the Star Wars room. And you can still see I had the Star Wars banner, which is on the back wall. And that was the 1976 San Diego Comic-Con banner, the famous banner that was hand-painted by Joe Johnston with artwork. You can't see. It's sort of behind the pole artwork done by Ralph McQuarrie, the Star Killer. So one of the early characters in George Lucas's early script of Star Wars. The Star Killer eventually became Luke, and with a little bit of Han in him and a little bit of Obi-Wan in him. And this was the beginning of putting the Star Wars collection in one room on the shelves, although I do see a big E.T. in the back.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a little bit curious because you just seem to be there's obviously a lot of stuff there, but you're just putting it on the shelves with no real method, if that makes any sense.
No, there was no real method to my madness. I try to get like things together,
right.
But it was just mainly making sure I had space for the items that I had and just trying to get them. I can see the shelves bending, groaning under the weight of the pressboard shelves. I haven't seen some of these things for a while. It's interesting. I wonder where they are.
Some of them are on the shelves at Rancho now. I know that for sure. Some of those action figures are definitely on the shelves. So this was, I guess, this picture is from the early 80s. I'm guessing.
More like the mid to late 80s.
Right. Okay. So this is at this point, you're currently the bureau chief in LA. Is that right?
became bureau chief of the Los Angeles office in 1987.
Right. Okay.
Just around the same time they called me back to New York to become bureau chief, and to ask me some final questions to make sure the job was for me, and I wanted the job. It was the weekend, around the weekend of the opening press event for Star Tours. And I had written a front page story for the Journal on Star Tours and was looking forward to the press event. So I had to make a choice. Did I stay for the press event, or did I become bureau chief of the Wall Street Journal?
Wow.
Tough decision, but I decided that my career was probably more important at that point. And we've lost James temporarily, but he's coming back to us. There we go.
Back. The joys of live broadcasts, I guess. There we go. So at this point, you had that choice, and obviously you chose that your job was more important. And how did you, when Star Wars stories broke, how did you deal with those? Because obviously you had a vested interest at this point.
Well, there weren't very many Star Wars stories for the Journal to do. It wasn't like it was a daily paper or covered entertainment that in that kind of detail. I did a couple of more Star Wars stories. I did a funny piece on the fact that the comic book and some products for Return of the Jedi had come out before the movie came out. And I remember we ran a picture of an Ewok eraser. And Ewoks were a big secret at the time. You remember that the back of the packaging of the action figures had them blacked out, so you couldn't see what the Ewoks looked like. And we found that Lucasfilm wasn't too thrilled with that story, but I think they forgot about it years later. And then in 1987, I did an op-edit piece, the columns that ran opposite the editorial page. I did a Lucasfilm Star Wars 10th anniversary piece, and I did an interview with George Lucas, which is the first time that I had really talked to him. And I told the head of public relations at Lucasfilm I'd be happy to fly up to Northern California and sit down with that. Oh no, we think you can do it by phone. I said, but I'd be happy to come up there. And I mean, I really wanted to see Skywalker Ranch. That was not to be the time, but I had a good interview with George and wrote the piece. And we got a letter to the editor that ran from one of the directors at the time of 20th Century Fox, because I said that the directors were not too thrilled with the idea of doing this picture and approving the budget. And I got that on good authority.
Yeah.
And he disputed that fact. Oh, we always knew that we trusted George, and a bunch of Hollywood malarkey.
No, absolutely. So now at this point, I think you'd written one or two books at this point. Is that right? Where did you?
I had written my first book, which is really how I got to know Lucasfilm a lot better. I had heard that they were thinking of doing a price guide, and I cold called the new. They had just started they had restarted their publishing division after many years. And I called the head of publishing and I said, if anybody does this price guide, it should be me. And she said, and you are. So I explained that I had this collection, and she said, well, I'd really like a price guide with anecdotes in it. And I said, well, that's really a different kind of a book. Well, one thing led to another, and it led to Star Wars from Concept to Screen into Collectible, which was really the first book about how Star Wars went from an idea in George Lucas's mind to how it became presented on screen with the help of Industrial Light and Magic, to how then the merchandise developed, and that became really the beginning of merchandising for movies
Yes.
Started it just took an industry that had been going along slowly, the licensing industry, and just made it explode. And then licensing for movies became a huge part of Hollywood, thanks to Star Wars.
So at this point, we're towards the end of that decade, and things are relatively quiet with Star Wars. Star Wars has sort of gone into let's call it hibernation, for want of a better word. And you then get a call. I mean, were you surprised to be getting this call?
Well, I had done the first book. I had done the price guide with Tom Tumbush and his son Tien Tumbush, and then I started doing QVC television shows, Star Wars collection shows, mainly because of the first book. But then I became sort of the sidekick to a guy named Steve Bryant on these shows in the U.S. And we did, I ended up doing about 50 hours worth over a period from 1994 to 1999. And it was great fun. I would fly back to a suburb of Philadelphia, and we'd do a 2-hour show and sell these limited edition Star Wars autographed photos and comic books and trading cards. I mean, very, very limited metal trading cards. And you look at the bottom of the box, I'm touting how these are a very limited edition. And I turn over the box and look at it and said, 1 out of 49,999. So there's different definitions of limited edition. But in 1996, I had gotten a call in 1995 from the head of publicity at Lucasfilm. At the time I had started working on another book, the first Star Wars encyclopedia.
Yep.
Or was in negotiations to do that book. And she said, Steve, we're looking for somebody for a 1-year only job to come in and go out and do maybe 10 fan conventions in the summer of 1996 to talk about the special editions coming up. And do you know anybody who might be interested in something like that? And I said, well, let me think about it and get back to you. And I thought about it, and I had been bureau chief for almost 9 years at the Journal, and it was time to do something else, either at the Journal or somewhere else. And frankly, I followed my bliss. And even though this was a guaranteed 1-year only job at a salary substantially less than what I was getting paid at the Wall Street Journal, I decided to take the job. And another reason was I was having trouble finding time during my job at the Journal to write the encyclopedia.
Right. Yeah.
So I figured if I took this job and I went out on a Friday, went to a fan convention, and then came back on Sunday or Monday, and then I could spend the week working on the encyclopedia. And that worked out pretty well, but I ended up doing not 10, but about 40 conventions that year, all over the country. And then I started doing conventions outside the U.S., in Mexico, and eventually I went all over the world doing Star Wars conventions. And that's the way a lot of fans met me, and I met a lot of fans.
So, I mean, obviously you've got a lot of stuff to move, and it's a 7-8 hour drive between where you were living then and between and to where you ended up in Northern California. So obviously, you just had a normal removal company come along and move you.
Well, it was 1998. They forgot to fire me. Let's put it. Okay. They forgot to lay me off after a year, and they started up a new marketing department, and it was up to the guy that they brought in as head of marketing whether he wanted to be on the staff or not.
Right.
he decided that he could use me as head of fan relations and as head of content management, which would be all of the photos and information about the upcoming prequels and
Right.
how we deal with them, because there were thousands and thousands of photos that were being taken on the set, plus the frame outs, the film frames, as ILM worked on putting visual effects into the movie. And when did we release these, and when and who did we release them to, and what kind of time frame? And so it was a multi-part job. But I traveled from LA to Northern California every week in 1997. Wow. And then in 1998, they finally said, okay, move up here. This is a permanent job. Right. So, yeah, it was took two 48-foot moving vans and a 24-foot moving van. They said it was the second largest residential move that this company had ever done, second only to a mansion with two baby grand pianos. Wow. And well, I had a 3-story house. 2 of the stories were filled with collectibles. 1 story with my space toy collection and 1 story with my Star Wars collection. And 5 storage lockers filled to the top. I mean, every storage locker was filled top to bottom. So it was quite a move, and it was quite a bunch of stuff to deal with. Luckily, we found a place in a far suburb of San Francisco, about an hour drive north of San Francisco, about 40 miles, called Petaluma. Yep. And lovely city of about 60,000 people, and found a property that had former chicken barns.
Well, let's have a look. Let's have a look at a picture. Just bear with me a second. Let's show people a picture of that. So this is what you had. So there we have it.
There were, according to the neighbors, up until the early 70s, about 20,000 egg-laying hens in this building. And then it was converted into a manufacturing facility for machinery for cabinet makers, the guy I bought the property from. And so some work had been done, but it was still, as you can see, very rough. And but it was space. All I saw was space, and got very excited when I walked through the door of the barn the first time. But there was a lot of work that needed to be done.
Is that what sold you on the property? Do you think it was just because it had this amazing expanse, and that you knew that you could fill it and make something of it? Did you?
Yeah, and the house was very nice. The house had been remodeled in the late 80s, so there was plenty of room in the house. It was originally a 1950 farmhouse that had been completely remodeled with additional rooms added and modernized, and so it was the perfect package.
How long did it take to transform the barns into this?
About 9 months.
Right.
And this was just the first barn.
Yeah.
We didn't tackle the second barn until many years later. But you can see what the difference is. And I thought, this is going to do me for the rest of my life. And then came episode 1 and all of the merchandise.
So there we see it with some of the episode 1 merchandise in there.
This was the first look of what became Rancho Obi-Wan. We didn't turn it into a museum until 2011.
Yeah.
But I still had some. So this was more of rather than just the stuff on the shelves like you saw in Los Angeles. This was some thought had been given to how things were put out on display shelves, and putting like items together in the recesses of the warehouse. But it was a very nice warehouse, but it was still mainly a warehouse. and I had people over. I had friends over and people from the 501st and other Star Wars fans. But it was sort of as things happen.
I think the Rebel Scum crew who came to you around about 2007 or 8 were responsible for putting this together and painting this and stuff.
Right. Philip Wise and the Rebel Scum crew put together the stage. Philip figured out how these are animatronic cantina creatures, the aliens, the Bith musicians that were part of a display at FAO Schwartz in Las Vegas. And they played behind a soda fountain, and they played their music and they moved based on an air compressor. And these were made by a company in Southern California that manufactures animatronics for both Disney and Universal Studios, and with Lucasfilm's permission. Mm-hmm. But when FAO went bankrupt, these were part of the bankruptcy auction, and they were listed online as alien mannequins with a picture. And I knew exactly what they were, but I didn't know if they would come with all of the equipment to put them together and whether we could figure out how to do that. And Philip figured out how to do that. And the guy who took care of them at FAO left his phone number and said, if you have any problems putting these together, give me a call. So that sort of helped. But Philip and the Rebel Scum crew built the stage, and the soffit behind them is hiding all kinds of electronic equipment that makes these guys work, and then we take the tube out to the back to an air compressor.
And we also have the Ralph McQuarrie, Joe Johnston Comic-Con banner in the background there as well.
Yes, so you can see the banner. You can see Ralph's artwork in the middle there that was actually taken from a cast and crew T-shirt and sewed onto the banner. And then this was at the table. This was taken to a couple of conventions. So you see it in pictures from San Diego Comic-Con and also Worldcon, which was in Kansas City that year in 1976. And it's sort of the first object dealing with fan relations and Star Wars. And so it is one of my most treasured pieces. Somebody asked if this branch of Obi-Wan is my personal residence as well. Yes, not in the barn, though.
So going back to 1999, you're now living in Northern California, and the prequels are being made. And had you ever wanted to be in a Star Wars film?
Of course, James. Who hasn't? So in 1997, things were being filmed in Leavesden in the UK. And I got to go over there with the fan magazine editors. At the height of Star Wars Mania, there were 7 fan magazines worldwide. Of course, there was the Star Wars Insider, which was taken from the original Bantha tracks, and then Dan Madsen and Fantastic Media turned it into the Most Amazing magazine, which had a long run, and then it's had other publishers. Titan now has it, and it's still going strong, although it's in hiatus right now because of the pandemic.
Yeah. So you got the opportunity to go to be on set. Did you know that you were actually going to be in the film at that point?
Well, I actually wasn't in the film. I dressed for the film.
Ah, okay.
So that was somebody else's costume, and right. And then
Naboo Courier was the costume you were.
Naboo Courier, and so it was a background character, and the filming was actually postponed for a week.
Right.
And so I had to go back to work, and the Germans and the French had to go back, but the French came back, And Dan and John Bradley Snyder stayed there for an extra week to get in the movie. And Dan, of course, has a cameo shot. Dan Madsen leading the Kedu in the parade. So it's pretty cool stuff.
So in the next 10 years that followed, you're working full time at Lucasfilm. Celebration becomes a thing. You're heading up all these things. The prequels are all coming out. It was, I mean, I remember watching those panels from San Diego, and you, I mean, for me, one of the biggest things was the reveal of the title for Revenge of the Sith. Do you want to talk about that?
That's the most fun I had at Comic-Con. I was doing panels almost every year at San Diego Comic-Con for Lucasfilm, and the Lucasfilm hadn't done panels since the original trilogy. So I brought the panels back in 1996. My boss decided to come down in 1997 and see what Comic-Con was all about and see what our panels were. There was a slight glitch. They had the overhead projectors to show what we brought in video, and they were locked, and nobody knew where the key was. And so I had to just do a little soft shoe shuffle, and it was a little tough. And my boss was, shall we say, a little ticked. We redid the panel the next day. They found the key eventually,
right?
And they found the room to put me in, and we redid the video panel the next day. But that was a little contentious. But the best was in 1994. And
2004. Yeah, 2004.
I get the dates just sort of. So in 2004, we hadn't announced the title. For some reason, Star Wars fans love the title reveal, and that's become a big thing. And there have been some really strange titles, so there's good reason for that. Trying to figure out what the title means. But this is a title that you just feel fans are going to love. And so this was a great panel. We had Rick McCallum and Hayden Christensen live there. We had Carrie Fisher, because we were releasing a DVD set, and she talked about that. And I remember Carrie was not feeling too well at the time, and I saw her coming up the ramp as I was about to introduce her, and she was like hanging over the ramp, but I thought she was going to lose it. And as soon as I said her name, wow, I mean, magic happened, and she became the Carrie Fisher that you see on stage. She was a great person and a great performer, and she knew when she had to be on.
Yes.
And she was just super. But then we're going through, and I decided I wanted to do something fun for the title reveal to let people know without saying I'm going to reveal the title. So I said, I want to show you a clip. And I had the Lucasfilm video crew put together a clip where we had scenes from episodes 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. And as the scene was showing, the title would then spin up. It would say episode 4, Star Wars A New Hope, episode 5, The Empire. So there'd be a 2-part kind of reveal. And then we had some behind the scenes from episode 3, and it spun up to saying episode 3, and people were going like, oh, it's going to be the title. And it spun backwards instead. And then people went, oh, and then it went up again and it said Revenge of the Sith. And people started screaming and jumping and everything else. And I was wearing this overshirt, and I started unbuttoning the overshirt, and I was wearing a T-shirt that had the Revenge of the Sith logo that looked like the Return of the Jedi logo. So they loved the title, they loved the look. And I said, and by the way, the Star Wars store booth in the Lucasfilm Pavilion now has these shirts exclusively on sale. And the Comic-Con people told me that that was the fastest they ever emptied out Hall H.
Wow.
People were just running. And yeah, we sold quite a few shirts that day.
Was that your best experience, do you think?
That
Because
was
you've done so many of these things.
that was the most fun experience that I've had certainly at San Diego. And San Diego is the granddad of all conventions, and so it was. And I love the people at San Diego Comic Con who run it. We've become part of the family there. They gave me an Inkpot Award for fan services in 2011 when I retired from Lucasfilm. So it was pretty great. Celebrations, of course, which we're all missing this weekend.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
were wonderful because with the work of Dan Madsen and Anthony Daniels and I sitting in the fan club's office near Denver, we came up with what we were going to do for the first celebration. Little did we know that we were going to get 50-year rains in the area, and it became sort of our mud stock. But despite all the problems, people who were there still loved it, despite all the initial um, uh, situation with merchandise and trying to figure out where the store was and getting enough people out of the rain. But it was a wonderful experience, and Celebration has gone on to become part of what Star Wars fans now wait for every couple of years.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna share another picture. So bear with me a second while we do this. Okay, so in 2007, 2008,
Boy, that looks great, doesn't it?
again.
So in 2010,
Well, you did it in 2010, but you must have thought before that you needed to do it.
well, I was wondering where we're going to put a lot of the big stuff that I had in the collection that we had no space for in the beginning. And in 2010, it became obvious that it was getting time to retire from Lucasfilm. And so we decided to invest in redoing a back barn. And what you see there is part of the Jabba's Palace, which was done even after that. But we wanted to convert into a nonprofit museum. We filed all our paperwork. And in November of 2011, after another 9 months of rebuilding the back barn and making it part of the museum with a walkthrough space, there's the giant Darth Vader head that took 2 days to get up on the wall. And that's the head that was from Toys R Us in their Midtown Manhattan store, the Times Square store, which unfortunately no longer exists.
No.
And we, in November of 2011, we opened the doors to the public as a membership museum. And this was our, there's Tom Schaefer, mayor of Star Wars Town, and a whole bunch of other people. You're there somewhere, James.
Yeah. I wasn't there for this one. If you remember, I came out in the June, so whilst the building work was going on, but I wasn't there for this one, unfortunately. It's one of the trips I didn't make. I've been there everyone since.
There's James Arnold Taylor in the front there in a brown jacket.
Yeah. Duncan Jenkins and Carl Gorecki and
yeah.
So
yeah.
How did the nonprofit come to be? Was it a decision that you came up on your own? What made you do this?
It was really Ann Newman, who is the vice president and curator of Rancho Obi-Wan, who's been here about 12 years now. She came to do the inventory for 6 months, and met her husband to be, and things happened. So yeah, it's been great. We have a compound here, and Anne and her husband Stu live here, and we're one big happy family running Rancho Obi-Wan.
Certainly are. So I mean, we're 9 years on from the formation of Rancho Obi-Wan as a non-profit, and yeah, in a normal time, you would be the museum would be open for everybody. People could come and visit, and you love people coming to visit. I mean,
well, that's part of the fun for me is meeting people from all over the world, and we've had visitors from everywhere from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Dubai, Russia, Finland, all over Europe, Israel. So from almost every continent. And I think we had somebody here who had been stationed once in the Antarctic, although he wasn't living there at the time, so I guess that doesn't count. But yeah, we've had to shut down tours since March, and because we really can't even do, when museums open again in Sonoma County, we really can't even do social distancing here because we get groups of 12 people. It's a fairly narrow space. The whole idea is that you're on a tour with me or with a docent, and we tell you the stories about the collectibles. So Mark Newball's here. He's correcting your Chris Garrick.
Yes. Sorry, I called Chris Carl, and I apologize. Sorry.
Chris Garrick. Thank you, Mark.
Freudian slip. Yep.
We do 2 to 3 hour tours and talk about the collectibles and how things got here and what the relationship is to the saga and how they fit in and things of that nature. But we can't do that now, so we've had to postpone our big fundraising Rancho Gala. But we have been talking for years about doing a virtual Rancho Obi-Wan museum, and we pushed those plans forward. And so now we have a virtual museum. If you go to ranchoobiwan.org, you can click onto virtual museum and become a subscriber. And every week at different levels of subscription, there are 5 different levels of subscribing. And there's different video and photos and lots of other information. We have a photo archive of about 66,000 photos that we share, some every week, and we have a Scouting the Galaxy virtual column answering questions, and we do little tours. We talk about my career or several careers in newspapers and Lucasfilm and writing books and QVC and things of that nature. And so it's also a way to support Rancho Obi-Wan and help us in these times where we are really in some financial peril.
Yes. So I was going to make the point that everything that exists in Rancho Obi-Wan, all the collectibles, how do you get those collectibles? Because obviously people often ask whether the money that's donated goes towards those collectibles. So
no, the money that the nonprofit gets, the use of the collectibles, which I own, for $0 a year, and the use of the building for $0 a year. And so the money goes to insurance and utilities and maintenance and but never buying the collectibles. That's something that I do. So all the collectibles in there are owned by me unless they are donated specifically to Rancho Obi-Wan as the nonprofit, and then the nonprofit owns those particular collectibles. People have donated things to us. We get lots of donations of both fan-made items and other collectibles. If we have them already as part of the museum, then we can use those in helping to raise money, and it works out very nice. People have been very generous with their time and with their objects and with their donations.
So let's just talk about donations for a moment, because lots of people always ask, well, how can they help Rancho Obi-Wan? And there's lots of different ways you can do that today. And I can completely appreciate that times are tough for lots of people. But I'm sure if you're buying something at Amazon, you can actually use Amazon Smile, which is a free service that Amazon offer. And they actually give a small percentage to a charity of your choice. One of those charities being Rancho Obi-Wan. So you're not actually giving the money directly, but Amazon are actually doing that, and that actually generates quite a lot of money. So that's a way that people can help really easily without actually putting their hands in their pockets. There are other ways as well. So if you're on eBay and you're selling products on eBay, you can choose to give a portion or a percentage of your money that you earn on eBay to a charity. And again, you can choose Rancho Obi-Wan. So these are just a couple of really, really simple ways that people can give without actually digging into their pocket as such.
Yeah, and we appreciate all of that stuff. Right now, we're having a sale on items from our store. We've got some really nice merchandise. We were going to play Star Wars with Friends, which is a variation of the word game Words with Friends. But you spell out Star Wars words, characters, and phrases. And there were prizes to have. Well, the prizes, a lot of them are patches and buttons and things like that say 2020. So we're selling the prize packages at a discount right now at ranchoobiwan.org in the store. Yep. People can become Rancho Obi-Wan members. You get an annual membership kit, and it gives you the right to visit when we have visits again to Rancho Obi-Wan, which hopefully will be sometime early in 2021. We're anxious. Our docents are anxious. They're standing by and waiting to be able to give the tours again. And there are other collectibles to be had.
Absolutely. And people can become an annual member. They can join the virtual museum. There are lots of different ways to help now. And I have to say that the virtual museum is incredible. If you want unique insights into Rancho Obi-Wan, becoming a member of the virtual museum is really a really, really good way of achieving that. There are 5 different levels, as Steve said. You've got Padawan, Knight, Master, Council, and Insider. And each one of those gives you better access or more access to the behind-the-scenes work that Steve and others do at the museum.
Yes, and we've been doing a lot of video.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sort of writing my video autobiography in this thing. So,
which is about time. I mean, it's great that you're actually getting that out there, because I mean, you've got some amazing stories to tell, and I think it's really, really important that those are shared with the community.
Yeah, there are stories. There are stories to tell, indeed.
Yes. So, you're doing a couple of other things this weekend, because obviously this weekend should have been Star Wars Celebration. So, and I know this year being the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back, you were going to highlight as part of your as part of the Rancho Obi-Wan experience at Celebration, you were going to highlight the items that you've collected from The Empire Strikes Back.
Right. So we're doing a Facebook Live at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, daylight time. We're on daylight time, aren't we?
Yeah. PT. Yeah.
PT. Pacific time. Today and Sunday, with the Empire Strikes Back items that would have been in the Rancho Obi-Wan experience, which is the big booth that we have. Yep. And I'm looking forward to doing that and sharing some of these wonderful items, like the prototype Boba Fett rifle that you see in photographs of the original all-white Boba Fett costume. This is the original rifle that was held by the guy inside the uniform, and the all-white Mandalorian Super Commando. So lots of stories there. And we've got snow from the Wampa Cave for the Empire Strikes Back special edition, and just all kinds of other great items.
and that's on Facebook Live at 2 p.m. Pacific, which is 5 p.m. Eastern and 10 p.m. in the UK.
And that's on Saturday and Sunday. We're going to split the items in half, show half on Saturday and half on Sunday.
Brilliant. So if people want to reach out to you and people want to make contact with Rancho Obi-Wan, how can they do that? Just go to ranchoobi-wan.org?
Yes. And there's a template there in order to ask questions. And then there's also info@ranchoobi-wan.org.
Right. And also you're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and there's new stories and social media posts all the time.
Yeah, we try to keep the Facebook page updated almost daily with items from the collection, and that's always fun. So you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We're just getting more active in too.
Yeah. Well, on behalf of Forcefest and Jedi News, I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time to go through your journey from LA to the virtual museum today. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, James. I've enjoyed this very much, and say hello to everybody who's been able to join us and who joins us later. So thank you very much.
There's just somebody's asked a question about the Clone Wars, the giant Clone Wars maquettes in the back of the museum, about where those actually came from.
The giant Clone Wars maquettes are from made by Gentle Giant, and they were done for Lucasfilm. There were 2 sets done. One set is permanently in Singapore, where they did some of the animation for the Clone Wars animated series. And the other set went around the world they were at San Diego Comic-Con at the Lucasfilm booth. They went to Celebration Japan. And then, as things moved on, there was no use for them. They were put in storage. And then Lucasfilm, I think, got a bill for 18 months of storage and decided, wait a second, I thought we gave those to a different department, and the different department decided it didn't want them. So I got a call from Lucasfilm and said, basically, if you're willing to pay for shipping from Texas where they were stored, they can be yours for Rancho Obi-Wan. So working for Lucasfilm for 15 years has had many benefits, meeting wonderful people. It was a fantastic job. People at the company and all the thousands of fans I've met across the world. But it also has meant that they have shared some things with me, and that has been very worthwhile, because now I can share them with fans worldwide who come to visit Rancho Obi-Wan.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you again to all the people behind the scenes at Forcefest for putting this virtual convention on over these last few days. They're actually supporting Make-A-Wish. So if you want to make a donation to Make-A-Wish, you can go to the Forcefest page on Get Vocal, and all the information about how to give is there. So it just remains for me to say yet again to my very, very good friend Steve Sansweet, a big, big thank you for taking the time out and doing this with me today. And I hope that all of those people that are watching can go to Facebook Live in a few hours and learn a little bit more about some of the collectibles that Steve has acquired from The Empire Strikes Back. I'm James Burns, and from Jedi News, you can find all the latest Star Wars news all the time at Jedi News. So thank you very, very much. That's it, everyone.